One who is not sure about God's existence is called an agnostic. A person who deliberately sets fire to a building is called an arsonist. One who does a thing for pleasure and not as a profession is called an amateur. One who can use either hand with ease is called ambidextrous. One who makes an official examination of accounts is called an auditor. A person who believes in or tries to bring about a state of lawlessness is called an anarchist. A person who has changed his faith is called an apostate. One who does not believe in the existence of God is called an atheist. A person appointed by two parties to solve a dispute is called an arbitrator. One who leads an austere life is called an ascetic. An unconventional style of living is called bohemian. One who is bad in spellings is called a cacographer. One who feeds on human flesh is called a cannibal. A person who is blindly devoted to an idea, or a person displaying aggressive or exaggerated patriotism, is called a chauvinist. A critical judge of any art and craft is called a connoisseur. Persons living at the same time are called contemporaries. One who is recovering health after illness is called a convalescent. A girl, woman, who flirts with a man is called a coquette. A person who regards the whole world as his country is called a cosmopolitan. One who is a center of attraction is called a cynosure. One who sneers at the beliefs of others is called a cynic. A leader or orator who espouses the cause of the common people is called a demagogue. A person having a sophisticated charm is called debonair. A dabbler, not serious, in art, science, and literature is called a dilettante. One who is for the pleasure of eating and drinking is called an epicure. One who often talks of his achievements is called an egotist. Someone who leaves one country to settle in another is called an emigrant. A man who is womanish in his habits is called effeminate. One who is hard to please, very selective in his habits, is called fastidious. One who runs away from justice is called a fugitive. One who is filled with excessive enthusiasm in religious matters is called a fanatic. One who believes in fate is called a fatalist. A lover of good food is called a gourmand. Conferred as an honor is called honorary. A person who acts against religion is called a heretic. A person of intellectual or erudite tastes is called a highbrow. A patient with imaginary symptoms and ailments is called a hypochondriac. A person who is controlled by his wife is called henpecked. One who shows sustained enthusiastic action with unflagging vitality is called indefatigable. Someone who attacks cherished ideas or traditional institutions is called an iconoclast. One who does not express himself freely is called an introvert. One who behaves without moral principles is called immoral. A person who is incapable of being tampered with is called impregnable. One who is unable to pay his debts is called insolvent. A person who is mentally ill is called a lunatic. A person who dislikes humankind and avoids human society is called a misanthrope. A person who is primarily concerned with making money at the expense of ethics is called a mercenary. Someone in love with himself is called a narcissist. One who collects coins as a hobby is called a numismatist. A person who likes or admires women is called a philogynist. A lover of mankind is called a philanthropist. A person who speaks more than one language is called a polyglot. One who lives in solitude is called a recluse. Someone who walks in sleep is called a somnambulist. A person who is indifferent to the pains and pleasures of life is called a stoic. A scolding, nagging, bad-tempered woman is called a termagant. A person who shows a great or excessive fondness for one's wife is called uxorious. One who possesses outstanding technical ability in a particular art or field is called a virtuoso.